Hey, this is Danny Cannell, and you're listening to the Grueling Truth Network.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Out of Left Field. Graham and Chris back here with you. Been a couple of weeks, I'll see by myself. Last show, I want to thank again our buddy Adnan Verk for giving us a few minutes of time before he was heading on to the air for baseball tonight. Chris was back in California doing something there, so we are glad to be back with you, and we're going to put the ball in play and lead off with I don't really know a good adjective to describe this story.
Strange, odd,
Strange,
different.
Yeah, upsetting, I guess.
Definitely.
Head scratching.
Yeah.
So the
That's
Detroit Tigers.
The best one in context.
Yeah, the Detroit Tigers, who we will mention in a few minutes again on the show, found himself jobless within the last 24 to 48 hours. Chris Bosio was fired by the Tigers for insensitive comments made to Tigers staff. So bullpen coach Rick Anderson will move up to the dugout. He will sit next to Ron Gardenhire and will become the pitching coach for the remainder of the year. A statement was issued by the Tigers and said the following, quote, "Effective immediately, the Detroit Tigers have terminated the contract of pitching coach Chris Bosio for his insensitive comments that violated club policy and his uniform employee contract. The organization holds all of our personnel to the highest standards of personal conduct, both on and off the field. We have zero tolerance for this type of behavior. The club will have no further comment on this matter," close quote. I hadn't heard much about this really until you and I started talking today. And then we started actually doing some looking into this story, and holy hell in a handbasket. It got weird. It got convoluted. Bosio was threatening legal action against the team for wrongful termination. His explanation is now being called into question by the person who he references in the explanation for what happened. It is all around just weird.
Yeah, I mean, so for those of you who aren't familiar with what's going on, which I don't really know that most people outside of Detroit are or care. I'm not sure that people in Detroit care if you've seen their numbers lately. But so Bosio's in the coach's room and he's talking to another one of the coaches, and one of the coaches supposedly asked him about Stumpf. And Bosio responds with, "Oh, you mean Spider Monkey?" Quote, "That's his nickname. He's a skinny little white kid who makes all these funny faces when he works out." Well, an African-American clubhouse attendant thought that Bosio was talking about him when he used the term monkey. And he got upset. And Bosio told him, quote, no, we're talking about Stumpf. And that was it. I swear on my mom and dad's graves, there was nothing else to it. Well, that seems like a reasonable explanation. Somebody overhears something. They think it's about them. It could be racially charged in the right context, and they get upset. It's a miscommunication. The problem comes a few days later that when Stumpf is being interviewed by the Detroit Free Press, and he says, quote, "Spider Monkey is not a nickname I have been called or I'm familiar with." Uh-oh.
Yeah. And then to top this off, so multiple sources, including one like The Athletic, spoke with multiple people within the organization. Here is a very, very similar stories. Granted, no story is ever the same. If you've been involved in law enforcement, you always know that an eyewitness is probably one of the worst you can have because everyone sees things differently. That's just one of the ways you always were kind of taught. The sources' stories all revolved basically around this. And this is a quote from one of the stories, or from one of the media stories. Quote, "Bosio called the attendant, who is African-American, a monkey, according to 14 sources. The remark was directed toward the young man who was collecting towels from the coach's room at the time. during a post-game gripe session in which Bosio was lamenting about a pitcher. During this exchange, Bosio made a derogatory comment about one of the Tigers' pitchers and then gestured toward the attendant before adding, quote, "like this monkey here," close quote, the sources said. The attendant pushed back at Bosio for the comment, and an additional team employee witnessed the exchange. Bosio was provided an opportunity to apologize to the attendant after his outburst, but declined to do so, according to multiple sources, close quote on the story. As far as the way this looks, man, I mean, this is wow.
Well, unacceptable. I mean, it's unacceptable in any context.
Yeah.
I get that a lot of people don't like the fact that we're in a place in society where you have to watch what you say all the time because someone might get offended. But realistically, all this being for or pro or against political correctness is really just whether or not you are a polite person. And nobody in polite company is going to use something that might be misconstrued as a slur. And if you do, you should not do that. I don't think that anybody would well, no person in their right mind would say that that's not a correct thing to do. Whether you want to call it political correctness or politeness or just common human decency, right. Don't do these things.
I mean, when you and I were both, I mean, when we were at Redstone together and when we were separate, we had friends of all different ethnicities, nationalities, whatever. And jokes were made by all parties about all parties because we all knew each other and we all cared about each other. We were close enough where we knew when it was okay. We're going to go out, we're going to have a drink, whatever. We're going to just goof off. But there was always a time and place where either things get said when you're by yourselves, and there are certain things you just never cross the line and say. This is one of those things, and I think for the most part, even the military, we always knew those lines. And that was, I think, why we got most of the guys we all got along with it, because we could always give each other just enough grief, but you always knew to stop when it came to anything that was historically racist or whatever it may be. This is something that is uncalled for. It's massively inappropriate. And General Manager Al Avila said that this is obviously not acceptable, and he led the investigation. I believe it took less than 48 hours, and Bosio's gone. And the only question I'll ask you, I mean, do you think he'll get another shot? I mean, if he is serious about pursuing legal action, number one, that's going to make this whole thing that much more wild, crazy, head-scratching. But does he have any more future in baseball? I mean, we've seen crazier things and more vile people come back.
Yeah, I agree. We have, and we see, in my opinion, more vile people being looked at for opportunities in baseball right now. There's that kid from Washington he's still getting looks from major league teams. I don't think he should have any.
Oregon State.
Oh yeah, from Oregon. I don't think anybody should be looking at the kid. But there are still teams who are desperate enough to draft a kid like that and take the crap storm that they're going to get from it. But at the end of the day, he's right. There is a no tolerance policy in Major League Baseball. And I think that before any team hires Bosio, it's going to have to go through Major League Baseball's front office. I think that Manfred's going to have a look at it and say, well, maybe do I want this guy in Major League Baseball? Do I want this guy to have another opportunity and possibly say something worse next time? You know what I mean? I don't know that I want this guy necessarily in baseball. I think he's too insensitive, and I get where he's coming from. He's an old school guy. He's 54 years old, and he doesn't think that what he said was out of line. And I mean, that sucks that he doesn't think that what he said is out of line, but you can't force those people to understand where they've messed up. One of the things that I've always said, and I've told you this before, is when you start to backtrack, when you start to justify, when you start the whataboutism thing, right? Well, what about this? What about that? What about the other thing? You're trying to deflect with that. It's almost always because you now know that you've done something wrong and you need to deflect away from it, right?
Right.
And Bosio does that, and that more than anything is the thing that makes me think that he did intend this in a way that was not totally above board. He says, quote, "We crack fat jokes on our trainer every day. All kinds of things are said in a baseball clubhouse. And for this to happen to me, I don't know what else to say, but I know I don't deserve this," end quote.
Right. I want to ask you, because you mentioned it, and I was going to at least mention on the show that Oregon State, congratulations, did win the College World Series last year. Came back with their backs against the wall in the ninth inning, took a 5-3 lead against Arkansas, forced a final deciding game yesterday, and ended up, I believe, blanking the Razorbacks for the win. GM Dayton Moore, he is the general manager for the Royals. This was not planned on the show, I know, but when you brought it up, I feel kind of remiss not to talk about it even briefly, and we'll see where it goes from there. The Royals are I think saying seriously considering would be an unfair statement, but are weighing the options. They are weighing the options as to should they consider giving this kid a shot at a major league career. Man, the story in and of itself as it sits is stomach rolling. Different parties have different stories. His family says one thing, the victim's family says another. It's a very kind of convoluted, gray story when you start getting into more of the depths of what's being said beyond what's just at face value. And I'm not questioning either side. I'm saying strictly it is a story that has a lot of tangents and tentacles that I haven't done enough research on to give you a fair comment. So I'm leaving it at that. Should the Royals give him a shot? He's, almost 8-10 years past what is alleged to have happened, what he pleaded guilty to, and he will give you different explanations as to why he pleaded guilty. And if they do, what happens with a team like the Royals? What happens to a guy like Moore if A, he succeeds, or B, he falls completely flat and fails miserably?
So let me start with your initial question. Should the Royals give him a shot? No. For several reasons.
If it was something besides this, would you say yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I would.
And the only reason I asked that, and I'm not getting into, but you and I mean, we're as close to family as we can be without being family. I know when you came into the Army, what it took to get you into the Army. That's why I ask, because we've all had those moments where we all have our own skeletons and we all have our own things that should prevent us from whatever. So that's the reason I wanted to know from your life experience, and you've been open on our show about, the choices that you've made that you've never expounded upon and shouldn't have to, kept you at a college ball. So I wanted to hear that side of things. Please continue.
So, reason number one why the Royals should not give him a shot, why no team in Major League Baseball should give him a shot. You are going to immediately split your fan base in half. You are going to absolutely polarize your own fan base based on whether or not they believe that this kid is guilty or reformed, or they're going to start arguing more about this one player and his past than they are going to care about your team. You're going to alienate a huge number of fans. You're going to alienate a huge number of people. And all because this kid may or may not pan out as a major leaguer. There are plenty of prospects in baseball. Plenty. And I don't think that any single college prospect of any kind, is worth alienating half of baseball or more. 2, I've done some research into this story because it's close to me. He was 15 when he pled guilty. The victim, the alleged victim, was 6 years old. I know what the statistics are for recidivism, for reoffense. I know what the statistics are for in this crime in general, because it's close to my family.
Well, and at the same time, to that point in and of itself, from what I have seen, the alleged victim also said that an assault had occurred 2 years prior when she was 4. So that would, to your point, say that if those numbers are accurate, this would not be the first.
Right. And even more so that if the statistics are accurate, that she's not the only victim and that he is likely to reoffend. Statistically, sex crimes are just more, they're more than just mistakes people make when they're young. These are part of their character, part of a psyche, a deep-seated issue that this person has and needs to work out. It's not just a mistake. Burglary is a mistake you make when you're young. Grand theft is a mistake that you make when you're young. People do stupid things when they're kids. And yes, if you did something dumb when you were a kid, like you got in with the wrong crowd and you robbed a liquor store and you went to jail, or you pled guilty and you served your time, fine. But not a sex crime. It is not the same thing. They are not equal in the motivation behind them. You don't fall in with the wrong crowd and molest a 6-year-old. That's not what happens. That's a deep-seated personal issue that doesn't stem from being a young, dumb kid. So, in my opinion, there's not really he pled guilty, served his time, he should be able to get another chance. Because more often than not, in fact, because child molestation is the second most underreported crime in the United States, the first being rape, because it's the second most underreported crime in the United States, the 56% recidivism rate probably equals out to about an 85% reoffense rate. But somewhere between 30 and 50% of molestation cases never get reported in the first place. So I just can't look at this particular case and say, this kid who has destroyed a life, because I can tell you, it destroys your life. It changes who you are fundamentally, forever. Should have an opportunity at his dream life because his excuse was, I was young and dumb. Now, if he was young and dumb and he knocked over a liquor store, and didn't hurt anybody, and he served a year or 6 months or 3 months or whatever his jail time was because he was in a bad crowd, sure, he served his time. He did a stupid crime, served his time. Maybe he's rehabilitated. He went to college. Give him a shot. But not this.
I have nothing. I'm not going to add to that. I think that's about as this is not one of those stories that I think either of us, even for the sake of having, a good debate, that either of us could stomach the idea of debating this topic. Choices were made, things happened. And here's the one thing that I will say that I don't understand. How in the hell, if you're going to sit there and say, I did not do this, whatever it may be, but I pleaded guilty because I was told that, it was the best way I could get a deal. Man, if you came close to accusing me of that, ain't no way in hell I would accept anything if I didn't do it.
Yep.
There is not a chance anywhere.
Nope. Here's the thing. If the evidence against him was so strong that he felt that a deal was his only way to avoid conviction by jury, then he was guilty. That's what deals are for.
Right.
Deals are so you don't get convicted by a jury because you were guilty.
So that is, and not at all where we had planned on the show to go, but I think that in the light of it being talked about, it deserved, both sides deserve to have that discussed. So with no real easy way to transition, let's go ahead and move away from that. And we will obviously talk about this more if anything changes, or if something happens that we don't expect. But let's move over towards the West Coast. Someone who we discussed quite a bit beginning of the year, who we thought, man, this whole thing is about to be different. Shohei Otani. I talked about this with you before you went on vacation. Talked about this with Adnan when he came on the show. We have the grade 2 UCL injury. Is it going to completely heal itself? Probably not. Is he going to have some kind of surgery at some point? Most likely. However, after undergoing an MRI, Shohei Otani has been cleared to begin a hitting program the Angels announced yesterday. He will be further evaluated in 3 weeks, but the tests are showing improvements in the ligament. This does not mean he will pitch this year, but it means you have the possibility of at least seeing if he can swing a bat, which he was also doing fairly well for this team. It's great that we're seeing him have a chance to come back, man, but I trust the doctors know what can and cannot cause a full blowout of that ligament, a full rupture. But man, I mean, seeing the way he swings, and we've looked at it. He swings very straight armed. When he gets that barrel through the zone, that elbow is almost fully locked out. Man, is it worth letting? I mean, we don't know what this program is going to be. I hope that he can continue to swing. I hope he can play. But man, I just don't know how doing anything beyond having to have it repaired is going to end up being beneficial here. I mean, how good is he really going to be just trying to swing and you're still running the risk of injury. And the longer that you postpone this, and I understand the risks involved, him coming back, but the longer you push it off, if it doesn't begin to continuously, if it doesn't continuously improve, you're just putting yourself further and further behind from when you can finally have him back.
So let me ask you this. Is Shohei Otani the difference between a winning Angels club and a losing Angels club?
I don't think so. I mean, the Angels are a team who have been wildly disappointing in the last month and a half. They have fallen well outside of contention, at least in the moment, and that we expected. But I mean, does a guy who pitches once every 5 days and hits 3 days out of a 5-day work week, if you will, is that going to be the difference for this ball club right now? I don't see it being the difference.
I don't either. I don't see Shohei Otani coming back from this injury and the Angels suddenly surging forward. And to me, that's a good enough case to say, you know what? Stop rushing it. Just slow down. Relax. Let Shohei Otani's UCL sprain heal if it's going to heal. Don't rush him back into swinging the bat. Don't rush him back into throwing the ball. Let him heal if he's going to heal. Or take him down. Have the surgery, repair it, and we'll try this again in 2020. Because if you rush him back, if you rush him back and he could have healed and he gets hurt and he has to have the surgery, you screwed yourself.
Right.
If he has the surgery because he can't heal on his own, you were screwed anyway. So why push things in order to get a bat that you're only going to use as a DH and that might cost you an entire season of baseball?
At least a season. And from what it looks like, I mean, the rehab assignment itself is not going to be what we're used to. According to their GM, Otani, instead of getting the traditional minor league rehab assignment, will get his at-bats via a series of simulated games and live BP sessions. That's according to Bob Nightingale from USA Today. He could end up facing live pitching as soon as next week. Man, they know better than we do what's going to happen here. Like I said, my concern is with the mechanics that Otani has, the way that he swings, tightening out that elbow. Look, I've been to the cage with you. I watch you swing. You know how much discomfort can come on just to your hands and wrists for making contact on a ball, either at the end of the bat or off the thumbs. What's going to happen when his arm is, fully extended and he takes? I mean, So I don't know, man. It's what happens when your arm is fully extended and you feel one go all the way from your fingers up to your elbow. That thing's locked out or hyperextended.
It hurts. It hurts in the best of times. But my thing is, if you're not willing to clear the guy to throw, I probably don't want him swinging a bat either, because he's not doing it with any less force. It's a different motion. But he's not doing it with any less force. He's not putting any less strain on that elbow, especially not the way he swings. He swings from the elbows. So I don't think it's a good idea. But again, I don't work for the Los Angeles Angels organization. I think that Epler's response that no doctor has told them that he needs Tommy John yet is kind of a cop-out, and that this is just a bad idea. It's like it's almost as bad an idea as shooting hot dogs out of an air cannon.
That's awesome. Yeah, no. I mean, that's unfortunately, it seems like the Angels medical staff is really getting their money's worth this week. Angels also announced that infielder Zack Cozart has been diagnosed with a torn labrum in his left shoulder, will require surgery. I think it's pretty safe to say, as someone I dealt with a microscopic tear in mine, and it caused me just regular discomfort. He's done for the year.
I have a tear in my left labrum now, and I have for a year and a half. It's small. It does give me some mild discomfort. It's not great. But, I couldn't, it's his non-throwing arm, which is good.
Yeah. But man, this is one of those guys, signed a 3-year deal in the offseason. He was that guy coming out of Cincinnati. You and I talked about thinking he was going to be a big piece for whoever signed him. And we were really surprised that that the Angels made that play. And that was kind of one of their big plays, come the offseason. Between that, of course, picking up Otani, whatever it was. But this year, man, had a decent start. And then in the last 27 games, he's hit 184. On base of 287, slug 224. It's pretty easy to see how this has begun to affect him. Man, this team cannot stay healthy.
No. And I think that unlike Shohei Otani, I think that Cozart is a big part of whether this is a winning or losing team.
Right.
He's a big presence in the clubhouse, and he's a fantastic ball player. I think that this is a bigger deal to them than losing Otani. And I think that not having him is probably let
me ask you this. In losing Otani out of the rotation and losing Cozart, and I think both you and I don't see Otani as being a real answer offensively, because you can't expect him to hit every day with this ligament issue. Should the Angels, and we're not going to get into trade talk now, but should the Angels be buyers at the deadline? We're going to get to our standings here in just a minute, but to me, I don't see a reason as much at this point for them to be buyers. What are you trying? You try for, a Mike Moustakas or a Todd Frazier or a Manny Machado. I just don't know if they can go out and get enough pieces without mortgaging their future for the next 5 to 8 years and still have a chance at making a run. Because we both know, I don't care who you go out and get, the likelihood of you being able to beat the Yankees, the Red Sox, or the Astros, it's still pretty slim, even if you add, some all-star talent. And really the biggest name on the market is going to be Cole Hamels. You need to find an arm to replace Otani even
if the Angels went out and robbed the Mets roster of DeGrom and Syndergaard and Giannis Cespedes. Not that that's probably someone who's going to get traded for any big names anyway, but just a bat like that, I still don't think that they beat Houston or New York or Seattle or Boston.
Yeah,
I think they don't have a chance.
And that's where I think this Cozart injury changes the entire landscape for them this year now. Because now you've gone from, okay, maybe we're a pitcher and something small away from being able to get back into contention. Now you lose a big piece in the middle of your infield. Everything else, I think, kind of just – I think it changes what they are going to do throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, I could probably tell you what they're going to do for the rest of the year, exactly what they're doing right now, which we'll get into in a few minutes, what they're doing right now. I can tell you it's not good. But I think absolutely Cozart is more of an impact on what they would have done for the rest of the year than Shohei Otani is. And Otani, I like the guy, I really do, and I think that what he was doing early in the season was incredible. But knew it had to give somewhere. And at some point he was going to flounder at something. I wasn't thinking that it was going to be injury that caused it.
I'm so glad you said that, because now I have to ask you a very important question on that. A month or so ago, maybe 2 months ago, somebody on this show, wasn't me, so that should help kind of narrow it down a smidge, declared that I owed Shohei Otani an apology.
You still do.
Do I?
Yes. Him getting hurt's not his fault.
Not his fault. But my thing was, I said, I don't know if he can effectively function as both a pitcher and a hitter. Right. Not just in functional purposes, but injury problems as well. Right.
Shohei Otani owes you an apology. That's what I said.
Wait, hold up. It's not his fault that you went ahead and disagreed with me. Don't just go pawning it off on their West Coast guy.
Shohei Otani owes Graham McGowan an apology for attempting to be a two-way player and not being able to handle it physically.
I'm not upset at him for getting hurt. I'm upset at you for giving me all the grief for making my accurate comment. Dude, I'm hitting like 667 this year on some of my takes. I mean, I thought that the Phillies thought were going to be a sleeper team. They've shown to be a strong team in the East. Said the Oakland Athletics. I believe someone is going to be mentioning them. Maybe both of us will be mentioning them here in just a minute. And I said the Otani. I'm just saying that I might sort of possibly have had some magical takes that are proving themselves right, which is awesome when we look at how awful my postseason takes were last year.
Our postseason takes. I'm not going to let you take that one by yourself, man. We were, you also called a couple of the series, and I'm like, no way, and then it was like, yeah, way, okay. But to be fair, I also made some really bad mid-season picks, some really, really bad mid-season picks. So, I'm willing to fall on my sword a little bit.
Before we get into the standings, because we're heading to standings next, I wanted to ask you, because I mentioned it on the last show, and I was really bummed out that you weren't here. So I want to get your take on the Terry Collins Syndergaard video, because I'm gonna bring some extra stuff into this. If you guys haven't seen it, which it has made plenty of rounds along Major League Baseball, different fan pages, social media. I mean, I think at this point, if you haven't seen it, you're probably living under a rock, or you just don't care about umpires or the Mets, which, granted, I can understand both of those purposes. So when the video came out with Terry Collins and Tom Hallion and all that stuff, with Hallion talking to Syndergaard and then pulling Collins aside after he's having an absolute just freak out, Major League Baseball has come out within the last, I guess, week or so. This video is apparently violating the CBA between umpires and Major League Baseball. We've all seen the video, and we've heard some of the great things like Tom Hallion saying our ass is in the jackpot, which no one really knows what that means. But apparently, according to the commissioner, he has said, quote, "We made a commitment to the umpires that if they would wear microphones, certain types of interactions that we all know go on the field would not be aired publicly. We promised them that. So it's in the collective bargaining agreement. We had no choice in a situation like that than to do everything possible to live up to our agreement. It is labor relations 101. To not do that is the kind of breach of trust that puts you in a bad spot over the long haul." Baseball is trying to get the video erased from the internet.
Well, that's not how the internet works.
Yes. But I am curious because I told mine, obviously, but I wanted to know what your take was on that video. Just curious.
My honest first impression was, oh crap. That sounds serious. But when you think about the fact that these are two guys who've been in the league for decades.
Yeah.
And have worked closely together in those decades that they've been, that Howie's been an umpire and my brain's not doing names today.
Terry Collins.
Thank you. That Hallion's been an umpire and Collins been a manager. These guys have interacted a lot to the point of, I don't know that you want to put the term friendship between a manager and an umpire, but there is a definite level of professional respect between these two guys. And what you immediately notice is that this is two guys having a very heated conversation from a place of very deeply held respect for each other. And I think that really makes more of a difference in the context of this video than what you're hearing them say. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and one of the best things I saw was a guy who wrote an article about the video and said, all right, let's break this down. Because what you realize is, and I wish that this was actually going back, and I would have loved to have heard Joe Buck talk about this, because he, and I believe it was John Smoltz, ripped Adam Hamry going, well, he's not trying, like, what are you doing? He's not trying to throw at him there. Like, you know, I can't believe that happened. But what does Terry Collins keep saying? You got to give us a shot. Why don't we get a shot? What the hell do you think he's talking about, guys? He's talking about getting back at Chase Utley for breaking Ruben Tejada's leg when he says Major League Baseball isn't going to do a damn thing to that guy. He's not talking about Odor and Bautista for fighting 2 days ago.
Right.
This was absolutely retaliation handled properly by the umpires. And you hear Hallion going, well, you know how I feel about that. Not you shouldn't hit a guy. It's baseball. I know the rules. You know I know what it means. But you've got to know that right now, because of what happened in Texas, I have to do certain things because baseball is so uptight right now. Because when we discussed this, that situation prior to it all escalating was kind of bumbled a little bit. No one saw it exploding that big, that quick. So all of this is Collins going off because he lost his pitcher and they didn't hit Utley. And it's Hallion going, I understand, but I have to do my job because my bosses say this.
Right. Well, and I mean, look how fast this can get out of hand. even with the Odor incident, I mean, a couple of days before, that was a big fight, man. I mean, that was a big deal. It's always funny to Jose Bautista got punched.
Let's be honest. Odor got paid, I think, at the end of that year, and I think that fight was the last big hit Odor's had in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, it was definitely his biggest hit in the last 2 or 3 years. But it's funny to look back and go, oh yeah, look, Jose Bautista got punched in the mouth. That's exactly what he deserves. But these things get out of control. Look at what happened in Baltimore last year when Baltimore and
Boston
were throwing back and forth, and then Xander Bogaerts gets hit,
and that bled over back to Boston. It bled over to two series.
In Boston, they go back to Boston, and then somebody's throwing behind Adam Jones's head, and
the racial slurs began.
Right,
and then we saw Holbrook toss. I think it was Gosman because of a curve. I mean, it's just it's
and then look at what happened this year between Miami and San Francisco, right? You have Hunter Strickland, who's a bigger problem than he's worth, jaw-jacking at a guy on third base because the guy celebrated getting a go-ahead hit, and he jaw-jacks at him as he's walking off. The next night, a rookie pitcher hits the guy. Mattingly comes out and basically tells Posey that he's going to get plunked in front of the umpire because he's mad that the umpire issued warnings immediately after the first pitch. And he comes out and he's like, well, if you thought it was intentional, why don't you just boot the kid now? And then he basically looks at Posey and goes, yeah, well, you're getting plunked. And then Posey gets plunked. And Mattingly and the pitcher both immediately get dumped. But you have to, right? Because you've hit Posey because your guy got hit.
With the hit, I get the unwritten part, but where you hit him was Bush League.
Right.
You threw
the rim up at his shoulder.
It was up. And granted, it hit his guard, so he had the protection.
But he had to bring the guard up to get it in the way.
Where he threw it ticked me off.
Yes. And so, and Mattingly and the pitcher both immediately got ejected, as they should. And Bochy was furious. But that really could have gotten bad because what if Posey hadn't gotten his guard up and that hits him in the top of the shoulder, in that shoulder bone at the top of the shoulder, or even comes in on his neck or his cheek? And now all of a sudden you've hurt a guy who was not involved in the situation in any way whatsoever, simply because he's the big name guy, you hit him.
Right.
This is where these unwritten rules get out of control, and umpires are the only people on the field who have any modicum of control over this. Managers don't have any modicum of control. You can tell a guy not to go out and plunk the guy, and he's going to come back in the dugout and go, oops.
Right. Well, and even you hear in Syndergaard, hey, it was wrong time. Not the wrong time to do anything. I was throwing a bleeping fastball. Like, no, you can't do that in that situation. And you hear Hallion keep saying you can't do it in that situation. So, I thought that, that was, it's just, I get them saying you don't want that to be aired. And I've heard Terry Francona going, no, we don't want to have those things out in the media. But you know what? For those that don't understand, yes, the first, the first thing that you're going to hear is, oh man, oh man, how bad Collins got into him, and he called, Adam Hammery a name from Bull Durham. They got Kevin Costner ejected. If you don't know what that means, go watch a movie. There is so much more respect there than what anybody understood. And I love that about the video being leaked because, A, you see how they handle it. The only thing better would have been if it was one of the arguments that you and I have talked about how he's not arguing about anything real.
Right.
He's just out there yelling. It's like, what is it?
It's like, I know you have to eject him. I know that's the rule. You don't have to tell me. I just have to stand out here and look bad, damn it. And then that gets
what is it? The Dasani commercial from years ago with Lou Piniella. It's like that was a great call. You've been doing great all day. I am so proud of you. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You're welcome. But I've got a rep to uphold. You tossed me. Okay, I'll see you tonight. And it throws his cap, and the umpire throws him out. And everyone's like just cheering, and the whole thing is about how good he's been doing. And it was just, it reminds me of that.
Oh, that's good.
So let's go ahead and get ourselves into the standings. The show took a bit of a different turn. Honestly, that's why we like this show, guys. We like it because we're part of it. We also like it because y'all listen to it, which is awesome. We thank you guys for listening to us. Of course, also listening on thegruelingtruth.net, Apple Podcast, and checking out our page, Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham, and at OO Left Field on Twitter. So a couple of things we didn't really plan for. We came up, we discussed. We're going to shelve a couple of topics for next week, but we, of course, can't let you go without giving you the standings in our top 5, bottom 3. We are right around the corner. Next week, we'll go ahead and we will do our next power rankings for the month. So I know the month ends really this weekend, but hey, coming into this with Chris you're still doing school prep, even though school's out, which I don't think I mentioned this when it happened, and I apologize. So if you guys, we've mentioned this, Chris is a school teacher. He is a half-year full-time school teacher. He was a long-term sub the first half, graduated, got hired as a full-time teacher, so finished his first year teaching. What's all said and done, he's been teaching for a year. Yeah, Chris Furry, going into his second year teaching, has been elected as the department head for his English department as high school, which normally comes from
is the accepted term. Yes.
Sorry.
I'm the faculty council person for the English department.
So he's the department head. You know what? Forget it, guys. I'm sorry. I was trying to compliment him. He wants to correct me. So we're going to move on to standings now.
No, I appreciate it. I really do. I really do appreciate you. You give me the recognition. Teaching is something that I went into knowing that I was going to have to work hard to do it, and that being older, post-military, that I was going to have to work a bit harder in order to really get the kids to be on my side and get the other teachers to be on my side. And I feel like that's something that I've accomplished. I was elected faculty council person for the English department, which I'm very proud of. And also, I don't know if I told you this or not, I was also selected as the faculty advisor for the National Honor Society as well. Nice. So I'm pretty excited. As a second-year teacher, that's a couple of really nice tips of the cap to what I've been able to accomplish in my first year. So I appreciate your recognition of me.
Of course, and thank you for correcting me in the middle of my recognition. That was awesome.
You're welcome.
So getting into the standings. Yes, it is, and most certainly is. In case you've been living under a rock for the last 3 months, the Red Sox are pretty good this year. They sit on top right now of the National or the American League. Yeah, not the National League, of the American League, on top of Major League Baseball right now by a game. They have one fewer loss than the Astros, who have played one more game. So they are 55-27, a game up on the Yankees, really still based on just on winning percentage. The Yankees have a lot of doubleheaders coming up in the next several weeks. That's going to be big for them. That can be a big swing up, or the possibility of a big swing down. I talked to my dad about this a couple of weeks ago, and this is the big difference. We talked about Ernie Banks saying, let's play 2. Ernie Banks played 2 with a lot fewer games on the season. So you had more days of rest built in. Right now, this is going to be a big test for that Yankees ball club. They're young for the most part. They should be able to handle it, which is good. We've seen Stanton begin to build back up. So that's good for them. How about this for impressive? The Tampa Bay Rays are, yes, 2 games below 500, but they are 7-3 in their last 10, 10-14 in the month. Man, still 2 games below 500 in third place in that division. Dude, tip of the cap. I say it every tip of the cap to Kevin Cash The Blue Jays get Marcus Stroman back and then put 2 more guys on the DL. They're sitting fourth. The Orioles are going to go into full rebuild mode. I don't know if Buck Showalter will be back next year, and I think that might be a mutual decision because Buck is a veteran manager who I don't think wants to be around, and I don't think is the right manager to be around for a rebuild. And I don't say that in a negative way on him, but he is a guy who knows how to work a team for contention. The Indians in the Central on top. That is, I don't even want to say that's a runaway division. It's a really, 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 really bad division where every team except the Indians is below 500. It's basically now the AL Central is the NL East from last year. That's about the best correlation I can give you. The Twins are probably going to be sellers. They are who we thought they were. The Logan Morrison grab again that the Braves gave up looks great for them. He's been very bad. The Tigers are 1-9 in their last 10. That will come back to them in here in just a few minutes. The White Sox and the Royals, awful. The West is still really, really fun. The Astros on top by 4 games on the Mariners, 3.5 games on the Mariners. Now, yes, I get that 7 games separate 2 and 3, but the Oakland Athletics are 44-38. They are better. If you look at this right now, they are 3 losses because the Indians have played fewer games. They are sitting almost on pat with the Indians, who is a division leader. 44-38. They are, I believe, the 4th or 5th best team in the American League right now. I mean, that's just – it's kind of –
And unfortunately, the American League is so good that puts them 7 games out of the wild card.
A wild card, I know, and they're 8-2. It's just this is really an impressive run for this team. They are real. It is really cool to see. The Angels have just plummeted. They've lost 6 straight. They are 41-41, sitting in 4th place. The way I think that what we said with Cozart makes sense. Buying would be. I think irresponsible this year.
Yep.
Hold on to what you have. Let your guys come back. Focus on next year. Unfortunately, it's one of those things. I would love to see Pujols try and bring a ring to LA or get them back into it. But right now, the Dodgers have kind of reclaimed that area as they are kind of growing or rising in the standings. The Rangers, 36-46, 10 games below 500. They will sell. Hopefully, I think Beltre will move. Cole Hamels has been talked about by the Mariners, other teams. He will most likely move. Next
Hamels has a trade clause, a no trade clause.
I believe he does.
Like a strong one.
I believe so, but I think he will move just because he's not going to want to stay there. And by the way, next week I'm taking the NL. There is way more excitement in the NL, and I'm kind of getting bored of the same thing. So, yeah, you get it one more time, and then we're changing it up.
All right. Well, so in the National League in the East, Atlanta is starting to struggle a little bit. They're still on top of that division in the National League East, 45-34, 11 games above 500. They're playing really well, but they're 5-5 in their last 10, and they've lost their last 2. And one of the disturbing parts of that, which we'll get into a little bit later here, it's more of a tip of the cap to the team that I'm talking about than it is a negative against the Atlanta Braves. But they lost a series to the Cincinnati Reds, the former worst team in baseball, no longer the worst team in baseball. And when you see that, you got to wonder, is that a deficiency on the part of the Braves, or is it something going on in the Reds organization that's making them a better team? We'll get into that in a minute. Philadelphia, couple of games back of them. Looks like they've still managed to maintain a little bit of their momentum. 6-4 in their last 10. They won their last 2 against the Nationals, who are sitting in 3rd place.
And Michael Franco, a guy we talked about a year or so ago when he was a rookie, is now looked at being a trade possibility because he has fallen off dramatically as an offensive player for that ball club. So he could be on the move come the deadline.
Right. And the Nationals sitting in 3rd place. 2 games back of Philadelphia, 4 games out of 1st place. I don't think that this Nationals team is going to materialize as the dominant force in the East that we thought they were going to be. If they do, it's going to be after the All-Star break, and they're going to need to retool a little bit and probably pick up some bats and arms at the trade deadline.
3-7 in their last 10, lost 3 straight.
Yeah,
Up sub 500 at home. They are 4 games over 500 on the road and 1 game below 500 at home. It is one of those odd years. I want to ask you real fast, how badly is Bryce Harper's struggles this season going to affect him come free agency time?
Unfortunately, I don't know that it's going to affect him that badly on the free agency market, but
I don't think he'll break the $320 million that Stanton did.
No, I don't.
If he does, it's overpaid.
I don't think anyone will. I don't think Manny Machado will, and he's putting a hell of a season together.
Ooh, that one maybe. He might touch 350.
Look at the frozen wasteland that was free agency last year, and we had some decently big names in free agency last year who went a long time and did not get the money.
And that's what comes back to our discussion was last year's debacle to try and set the stage for the GMs.
No, I think it was. It was. And I think that that's why we're not going to see another player get 320, because you can't justify 320 if you're doing it for less than 10 years, and you can't pay a guy for 10 years if he's not going to produce in years 7, 8, and 9, and you're paying him $30 million. You just can't. You can't pay the luxury tax. You can't pay the bonuses and all that other stuff for one player when we all know that baseball takes 9 guys to win a championship. So I think absolutely.
I think where this will go, and what will have to happen is some GM will have to basically flip the bird to arbitration, and in year 2 or 3, see a guy who is just that, I know in my experience he's going to be it, and pay him a stupid sum of money for a decade, from his 23 or 24-year-old age season to 33, 34. Yep. That's how it will have to happen. And until that day comes, I think that, yes, the decade-long contracts are going to start being few and farther between.
Right. And you can't justify $320 million on 5 years, because that's a ridiculous sum of money. It is a ridiculous sum. That's $60 million a year. Yeah. So, no, I don't think that they're going to sniff 320. But the Mets are terrible. They're sitting pat at this point. The difference between them and the Miami Marlins is that they've had 4 games postponed due to weather, and the Marlins haven't. So the Marlins have played and lost 4 more games than the New York Mets. I will say this. I think 32 wins for the Miami Marlins and beating teams like the Diamondbacks and the Giants is a big nod to being able to manufacture runs on a team that I didn't think was going to be able to accomplish that this year.
I don't know if you heard this. I've heard this might be a possibility that the Empire State Building might have orange and blue lights up on the top levels where the spires are and everything. Mm-hmm. And I've heard the possibility with July 4th looming that there might be an upside down American flag to indicate that the Mets are in massive distress.
I think that's probably a fair bet, to be honest, at this point. The Mets are in disarray, which is another thing. One of the reasons is Sandy Alderson. That's something we're going to maybe get to. I don't know if we're going to get to it this week or next week, but
probably next week as the deadline looms. But yeah, that whole top to bottom is just in disarray.
But I will say this, and you know how I hate doing this. You know that this is going to hurt me as a person.
I love that. I love it even more. Let me hear it.
Jose Bautista is playing better than he has since 2014 as a New York Met. Jose Bautista currently holds a .254 batting average, a .438 on base, a .465 slugging with an OPS of 902 as a New York Metropolitan. to compare to his 143, 250, 343 slash line as an Atlanta Brave. So I don't know if New York is where he wanted to be and maybe he's excited to be there, or if a change of scenery back up to where he's used to playing, the sort of temperature or the sort of weather he's used to playing in, it has been a plus for him. But I got to give a little bit of a nod to Jose Bautista for stepping his game up when he went to New York. A little nod. He's still only hitting 250. Just saying. Moving on to the Central. 2 weeks ago, this was the division to watch to me. You know what I mean? Everybody was separated by a game or two. And then, I come back and now all of a sudden, well, not Cincinnati, but I come back and Pittsburgh has just plummeted, which is typically something that would get them put into one of our bottom threes, but not Pittsburgh, right? Because we didn't really expect Pittsburgh to do anything. We didn't know that Pittsburgh was for real. So,
and then we started to see some things that made us scratch our head because the Cubs were struggling and the Brewers were finding a way to, we're trying to find their way with Kane and Yelich and hey, maybe this is a chance maybe it's a chance for Clint Hurl to show why he could be a manager of the year. Right.
And apparently we were wrong. But speaking of the Brew Crew, they are still in control of that division. Control is a difficult word to use. They're 2.5 games up on the Cubbies, who are
2 syllables.
Who are in a bit of disarray themselves. The Cubs are struggling, and it's hard to see why. Their pitching rotation is terrible. So it's not really hard to see why they're struggling, but their defense is so good that you would think maybe they could manufacture consecutive wins. No, they're 4-6 in their last 10. Milwaukee's struggling as well. They're playing 500 ball right now, 5-5 in their last 10.
Darvish on his rehab.
Right. Darvish is having issues in Chicago. He's not going to be on the same timetable to return as he was, which is a big deal. You even used the words possibly done.
He will be a shell of the pitcher he was in Texas. I think that Yu Darvish is working his way, unfortunately, rapidly out of Major League Baseball.
Here's my hot take. I think St. Louis is going to get hot here pretty soon. And I think they're going to overtake the Cubbies. I don't know that they're going to win that division.
That's a good – I like that. St. Louis is in the Midwest. It's a very hot area of the country. Summer is rolling. I think Anheuser-Busch will be – sales will be up. And, it's probably going to temperature is probably going to skyrocket.
So I think that that St. Louis is going to get hot as a baseball team soon. They're 5-5 in their last 10, but one of the things that I think is pretty telling in a league that's not the most competitive league. I mean, obviously the American League is the most competitive league in baseball right now, but in a league that's not the most competitive league, they're still only a game out of the wild card, and I think that they can clear that 2-game gap between them and the Cubs in a weekend if they put their minds to it. I don't know that they're going to get the full 4.5 that they need to take to overtake Milwaukee, maybe at some point, but look for the St. Louis Cardinals, in my opinion, to be in contention for that division and certainly in contention for a wild card. Cincinnati Reds are the Cincinnati Reds. They're exactly who we thought they were going to be. They are playing a little bit better. We'll talk about that in a minute. I know you have some hot news about them, but we'll move on right now to the West. Because, I'm a huge fan of the NL West.
The Giants are there.
Well, it's not just the Giants, actually. I'm excited about the team that's in first place in the National League West. The Arizona Diamondbacks are playing every bit as good at baseball as any top team in the league. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They've won their last 3 in a row. They have stomped some really good teams. They have beaten the brakes off of everybody in their division at different times. And they're 47-34. I think one big move, and we discussed this, I'm not going to name that move because that'll just start a whole big conversation that we don't need to have this week. But I think one big name move puts them in contention for a ring. I think that they win the National League. I think I would put them up against any team in the National League right now. They're pat with the Brewers to be best in the National League anyway.
So you really think that the Diamondbacks signing Jason Worth? I'm sorry, I'm not supposed. We'll discuss that coming. I apologize. We'll discuss that.
Say Jason Worth. The only people in the last 2 years who have said Jason Worth are Tacoma Rainier's announcers and anybody who goes, hey, whatever happened to Jason Worth?
Well played.
The Dodgers are the Dodgers, man. They're struggling, but they're going to claw their way into contention in that division just because they have the talent to do so, and they have the money to get more talent to put themselves into contention.
And if I know the move that you just referenced, that may be the team who takes away that possibility for the Diamondbacks.
And I agree.
I think both those teams will covet the same player.
And I agree. I completely agree. San Francisco is my surprising team in the West, and I know you have to take that with a grain of salt coming from me, but in my opinion, San Francisco being so badly injured this season, so many guys going down to injury, so many guys making stupid mistakes and punching doors and breaking their hands and being out for 6 to 8 weeks and couldn't have happened to a better jerk. But we're talking Mad Bum gone for the beginning of the season, but the majority of the beginning of the season. Cueto gone for the majority of the beginning of the season, still gone. Finally back into a throwing regimen.
I feel like now, as you say that, like that's where Bryce Harper went wrong. You don't run out to the mound and throw your helmet. You walk out there with a door and let Strickland punch it himself.
Punch it himself, which he would do because he's an idiot. And but you're talking Mad Bum gone, Cueto gone. No real closer. I mean, Strickland's not the guy. Melanson's not healed well enough to be the guy. Kind of sad to see Mark Melancon throw in the 7th inning. I mean, that's a fall. But Tommy John's Tommy John, and it's difficult to come back from. But where they've fallen down, other guys have picked them up. Brandon Belt's having a career year. Brandon Crawford's being Brandon Crawford. Brandon Crawford was the best hitter in Major League Baseball for 6 weeks straight. The guy was hitting 4-something. And, it's impressive to see this team with so many of its big names down be over 500. It's also impressive to see them be better than the Colorado Rockies by 3 games, 2.5 games, because the Colorado Rockies are the team that you and I thought were going to play upset in the West. A lot of big names still there.
If I was the Rockies right now, I'd be playing upset too.
A lot of big names there that are just struggling. DJ LeMahieu not doing what he's expected to do. Nolan Arenado. Have you heard the name Nolan Arenado in a positive light in the last 6 weeks? Anything huge come to you out of Nolan Arenado?
Biggest I've heard from Colorado is that DJ LeMahieu should be someone they consider moving.
Yep. And that young rotation, again, we've talked about it 2 years, I think, in a row, that young rotation was eventually going to either needed to mature or they were going to be in trouble. And I think now that's come to fruition. They are in trouble. That's it, right? There's not another team in the National League West. Oh, the Padres.
No, you had it right.
Oh, right. There's not another team in the National League West. The Padres are a 4A team. They're just.
I want to ask you.
It doesn't matter what they do, right? They sign the big name first baseman. Nothing.
I'll ask you one question. Should the Giants be mid-level or big-time sellers at the trade deadline?
Oh, man. Why are you asking me?
Only option. Only option, only answer. Mid-level or big-time?
Mid-level.
Mid-level. All right.
Mid-level.
That'll be a fun tease. We will see what happens. We're going to start breaking down some players that we think will end up getting moved, and we will bring all of that to you as the trade deadline gets very close. Of course, the All-Star break is about 2 weeks away. That will be in the nation's capital. Plenty of things coming down the pike. We have reached the official halfway point we will reach the unofficial halfway point here in D.C. in a couple of weeks. Power rankings coming next week. The Mets and what might happen with their trading partners and who will actually be the guy pulling the trigger on said trades. Plenty of that coming up with you next couple of weeks, plus our mid-season awards. Expect all of it here on Out of Left Field. And thanks for hanging out with us, guys. For all of us here at the Grueling Truth Network, for Chris, I'm Graham. We'll see you next week back here on Out of Left Field.